welcome to episode 11 of the Best You, a coaching podcast. It's Gary here again, and of course I'd like to take this opportunity right off the bat to thank you very, very much for joining me for this particular episode. I hope that you're all doing great, and I hope that you're also investing in whatever work it is that you have committed to getting you closer to the best version of you. We are getting towards the end of February here, and of course that means we're getting a bit closer to spring, which is a bit of a big deal where I live in Calgary in Canada with regards to the change in weather, specifically from what can be a winter deep freeze to something a little bit more palatable. And the reason that I mention that is, you know, the literal impact of the weather seasons and what the impacts can have on us. And as with spring approaching, what that typically brings is an entirely new mindset and mental focus and attitude for many. And that's not only if you're an outdoorsy type of person, it's just your experience of the day, you know, the lighter mornings, the later sunsets, more daylight, and the temperature starting to kind of creep up a wee bit, and that just seems to bring with it a level of mood swing, a level of optimism that is definitely for the better. Now, I want to be clear here and say that I'm not suggesting that everyone is absolutely miserable and down during the winter. Far from it, but there's just something a little bit, I don't know, enlightening, refreshing about when the first signs of spring hit us. It's just a possibility for more time outside and the opportunity not to be in the dark as much, and the freedom and flexibility that goes with not having to navigate the snow, the ice, the slush on a daily basis. It's still here, to be super clear about that, but you know, you can see an end in sight, I think is probably the best way to put it, and it just brightens everyone's spirits. Or maybe I'm speaking for everyone when I shouldn't, and I can tell you for a fact that it does absolutely brighten my spirits. It's kind of like the seasons of life that I've recently been studying a wee bit, that I first learned from Tony Robbins, and I might talk about that at some point later on. But yeah, it's something that's kind of top of mind for me right now. Anyway, this is not a weather report. Of course, what can you expect from this episode is probably what you're here to actually listen to. So in this episode, we're going to work through a very high level review of a course that I just finished recently. Actually, there's not going to be a book report on this particular podcast. We are going to work through a course that I just completed called High Performance Habits, and that's based on a book that was published by Brendan Burchard in 2017. Before the course review, we will talk and walk through an overview of the most recent blog, which centred around the art of listening. And before all that, I'll just give you a wee bit of an overview of my personal journey and how things have been going since the last pod. I'm going to keep this one a wee bit brief. I felt like I went a wee bit too long on this one on the last pod, so this is not supposed to be all about me. It's supposed to be about the information that I can impart to you to give you a wee bit of a different perspective and maybe a focus on things that would serve you better. So like before, like always, I am continuing with my core passion, and that is of course one-on-one coaching. I have a number of clients on the go right now. Have specifically had a really good week this week. You know, the clients came with energy, and we managed to make some breakthroughs. You can't force things if the circumstances are just not correct to get yourself to an opportunity where you're going to make a breakthrough. You're certainly not going to make a breakthrough in every single session, but you get an opportunity to possibly scratch the surface of a breakthrough, and that's just been my experience this week, and maybe that was the inspiration for talking about the spring and the impact that the nicer weather has on people and their outlook. Perhaps, who knows, maybe not. I did mention on the last pod that I had changed my journaling from weekly to daily, and that's continuing, and that's going very well. Most days I do a morning reflection and an evening, or a morning intention setting. That's probably the best way to say it. And in the evening I do an evening reflection. Sometimes the evening ones kind of get forgotten, but for the most part I'm absolutely journaling every single day. And I have to tell you folks, I think this is a bit of a game changer for me. The type and style of journaling that I am doing is is very appropriate for me. It's kind of project managementy, it's kind of objective setting, it's kind of making sure that you're understanding your level of energy and the people that you are approaching or are attempting to serve on a specific day. So thoroughly enjoying doing that and talking about that with anyone who's willing to listen. I did finish my 30-day challenge videos on LinkedIn. And this is actually the week that I'm recording this. This is the first down week I've had since that 6 weeks of video content went out there, and I have about another 40-ish topics that I've been jotting down that will, in some way, certainly most of them will make their way to a future video of 2 to 3 minutes that I'll post up on LinkedIn over the next wee while. I intend to do that starting the last week in February here. So look out for that, and you can go back and see previous videos you might have missed if you missed any of them. I did actually do some kind of business setup, some admin setup, which I know is a wee bit boring, but it's quite important for setting the scene for future success for the business. And I set up my Calendly calendar where I can now have anyone, prospective clients, existing clients, and or mentors, friends, colleagues, go in and see my availability and book time with me without us having to do the back and forth of, are you free at this time? What about this time? Is that time still open? That time's gone now. So I have that set up, which is fabulous. You can see that on my website under the Book Gary part section. And I also finally set up my payment processor as well, so that I can accept bank transfers. I can accept credit card payments and things like that for the services that I am offering as well. So yeah, as I say, a wee bit boring, but kind of material and quite important as well. So I thoroughly enjoyed doing that. And it didn't take that long. It was one of these things I'd kind of procrastinated on a wee bit because I had just made up a story in my head that it was going to be more difficult than it was, and it was not difficult at all. I actually resurrected, not so much started, my study through my IPEC training provider, which is the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, and one of the qualifications I'm working through right now is called Core Dynamics, and it's focusing on the leadership niche. I do have a passion for leadership. I believe that leadership will be certainly a core part of my ongoing coaching and professional consulting as I go forward. So I just navigated the first major general part of the core dynamics, and I'm now started on the first of 9 classes. Actually, I've completed the first of 9 classes on the leadership niche, and I hope to get that completed within the next week or so, and I'll get that published. But the main thing is the learnings I'm getting from that and the opportunity to be able to use those learnings in service of my clients going forward is tremendous. And as I've said before, I just absolutely love learning. So it doesn't feel like work, and I will bash my way through the rest of that course and get it successfully navigated and incorporated. Now this is a wee bit of a personal thing, I also watched my team, which is Glasgow Rangers, for folks that don't know, and that's a football team, a soccer team back in Scotland. We went top of the Scottish Premiership this past weekend for the first time in a couple of years, and that's a big deal for us. We've been a wee bit of a roller coaster over the last 10 or 12 or so years, and for us to get back to the top of the league for the first time in a couple of years, we won the championship a few years back there, but as it turns out that was a bit of a one-off, and our rivals took over after that. But we're back at the top, and one of the main reasons I mention this is, one, I'm absolutely thrilled and delighted that that's the case, and two, one of the main things, we had to fire and hire a new manager, fire the previous manager, hire a new manager this past, what was that, October time, and we were in a bad way. The season looked like it was going to be a bit of a write-off, and we weren't in good shape. We got a new manager in whose name is Philippe Clement, who's a Belgian, and the main thing that everyone that's talking with or associated with the first team squad at the club, which is of course the most important part of the club, talks about clarity. And they talk about, he has come in, he has a specific style and type of way that he wants the product to be delivered, which is of course us to get successful results on the park. And every single one of them now knows what their job is, and they know why their job is important to be done a specific way on a specific game. They know what to do if things don't start to materialise the way that they're intended to materialise through anticipation and training and such, and it all comes back to clarity. So I think when you're thinking about some of the areas where you're not quite hitting the heights, you're not having a good time, you're not enjoying yourself, you're not making the progress or having the productivity that you're anticipating, consider how clear it is, the task you're doing, why it's important, why you're doing it, what happens if it doesn't get done, how important it is to you and the organisation that you're doing it on behalf of, if that's indeed what you're doing. And I suspect that a lot of the challenges that you will have will come from a lack of clarity. So maybe that will be something that we'll talk about at some point in the future. But I just wanted to mention that both in a personal and professional perspective, because clarity is a big thing, is a big deal for us, and if we don't have it, then we have a rough idea of what's going to happen from there. The books I have on the go: Still Coaching for Performance by Sir John Whitmore, where he goes through the kind of famous GROW model in terms of coaching. And on the personal side, I'm still working through Sir Elton John's memoir, Me. It's called Me, M-E. And that sort of thing. And you know, one thing I did want to mention here, and it's not so much something I've been up to, but something I did want to share. I got an email yesterday from the president and CEO of the Project Management Institute, and it's a fellow by the name of Pierre Lehmann. Apologies if I've pronounced that wrong. But what it wasn't a personal email to Gary. It was, of course, on a distribution list, but it was announcing the passing of one of PMI's founding fathers. And I'm going to read a wee bit of this out to you, if you don't mind. And it started off with, it is with profound sadness and respect that I inform you of the passing of our esteemed founder and visionary leader, Mr. James R. Snyder, and affectionately known as the father of PMI. Jim's legacy transcends time, leaving a permanent mark on the project management profession and the world. As the first CEO and one of the last living co-founders of the Project Management Institute in 1969, Jim's leadership and unwavering commitment propelled PMI to become the premier global organisation for project management professionals. Over the 55 years, his leadership, strategic insights and initiatives pushed PMI to reinvent itself, enabling it to become the leading authority in project management around the world, upskilling and reskilling millions of project professionals from all industries and in every country. Jim's remarkable contributions extended far beyond PMI. And the reason I mention this, it goes on to say some other things, and then, you know, rest in peace at the end. And the reason I mention this is just as food for thought for us, for myself included, of course, and what you would like your legacy to be. And your legacy doesn't have to be a lifetime legacy. It can be a legacy of how you behaved, how you delivered, how you were on a particular day, at a particular meeting, at a particular interaction, event, something like that. You know, you're building your legacy every single day is essentially what I'm saying. And while it might not end up as high profile as Jim Snyder's, it doesn't mean that it's any less impactful or any less important. So just have a wee bit of food for thought, you know, on this one as well, you know, in terms of, you know, I mentioned clarity earlier, and legacy is a thing that you can be more intentional with if you have more clarity too. So yeah, just thought I'd mention that as well. Very sad news, and of course condolences from myself to Jim Snyder's family and friends and the project management community at large. Okay, so on to the actual content. On to a brief summary of the recent blog that I put out there, which was blog number 12, and it was on listening, the 7 steps to improving your listening skills. And I think I mentioned this in the summary of, or the introduction of the blog, where about 10 years ago, I think it was, I did a talk at one of the PMI conferences on listening skills. And typically what I do, if I'm doing anything publicly or I write something, and it's not absolute, but if I see something being performed poorly, or I see something that's annoying or impactful materially to me in terms of what I'm trying to deliver, instead of, you know, moaning about it or ranting and raving about it and not really doing anything about it, I would typically then just put together a white paper or a a conference topic, speech, or something like that. And that's exactly what happened from this listening one. And I just wanted to kind of resurrect it, blow the dust off the previous presentation from a decade ago. And by the way, not a lot has changed in terms of our ability to listen and our inability to correct when we're not listening properly at the same time. So I offer up in the summary that it's still one of the most poorly performed acts in human dynamics today. It really is. That's just a fact, and I don't think that's very much disputable, with even with little to no research done by me on this topic. Just think about the interactions that you're having and how you're listening and how other people are listening, especially in today's distract-centric world. Then I go on to talk about the hearing versus listening. Hearing is the mechanics, the involuntary acceptance of noise into your ears and the transmission of the information from that to the brain. And listening takes that hearing, the mechanical part of that, and then helps you analyse, understand the information that you're being given, using the data that's presented and other things that go along with that to gain a deeper level of understanding of the information that you are receiving. So the different mechanics between hearing and listening. So if you're having a conversation with someone and you say, "Are you listening?" they'll say, "I heard you." You can then correct them to say, "That's not what I asked," because hearing and listening are two different things. And then went on to talk about the different types of listening. And they were provided. I just provided them in alphabetical order in the blog, just because I could. It kind of flowed pretty naturally like that, but also not to then create any sort of this listening style is better or more appropriate than this listening style. Different listening styles will be determined by the type and style of listening that you're attempting to do under any given circumstance. So we talk about active listening, appreciative listening, comprehensive, critical, defensive, dichotic, discriminative, empathic, informative, and therapeutic listening. And in the blog, if you go visit the blog on the website, you'll see explanations of each. And this was essentially to help you understand and appreciate that you are indeed listening differently depending on what and who you're listening to. So I would encourage you to take a peek at them and start to kind of gauge where you naturally navigate to, or what type and style of listening dominate, like you dominate, and areas where you're maybe just a wee bit weaker in at the same time. So we then go on to talk about optimum conditionings for listening, and this is really, I kind of coined this phrase when I was in the classroom talking about listening through the various communications or leadership classes I've taught over the years. And the optimum conditions for listening basically allows you to set the stage for when you're at your best, when you know you're not at your best, and that cognizance in others at the very same time. So I spend a lot of time in class because you have choice, and people sometimes don't believe that they have choice in terms of when it comes to, affording other people the opportunity to make sure that they have the optimum conditions, but also making sure you're at your best version of yourself when it comes to listening, because it's a very respectful thing to do, and it's also very important. And I do stress that everyone has their own personal optimum conditions for listening. And here's the 4 bullets that I put in here that are absolutely factual and absolutely correct, and probably the most impactful part of the blog. You know when you're listening, and you know when you're not listening, and you know when you're being listened to, and you know when you're not being listened to. Those are just facts. You know all of this stuff. It's actually what you do with the information that would separate you from the average to good, or from the bad to the average to the good, and the good to the great listeners. We already know this. However, for some reason, we still don't seem to take full advantage and validate and adjust despite the information and evidence being compelling in the moment. And this can lead to negative situations. It can lead to conflict. It can lead to strained relationships and things not working out the way that we would hope them to work out. And then challenge yourself to rate yourself on a few topics that I'll mention here in a second. The rating scale that I put in there was 1 to 5, 1 being I am terrible at this, and 5 being world class. I'm the best of the best. And it was on presence. How present are you in the moment? Generally, typically, how do you manage the distractions that invariably come your way? If the circumstances allow, how do you use eye contact when you're listening or when you're imparting information to others? The level of interrupting that you either experience or that you find yourself doing, the clarification that you would get from listening, repeating things back, getting a situation where you're actually truly understanding the information that's being imparted, how you demonstrate empathy with information that's provided to you, and then summarising what you've listened to once the conversation comes to natural conclusion. I would do that. Please, like if you want to pause this, rewind it a wee bit and go back to presence, managing distractions, eye contact, interrupting, clarification, empathy, and summarising, and give yourself a 1 to 5 and see, did you score a 7? As in 1 for each one? Did you score 35? As in a 5 for each one? Or somewhere in between? I suspect most people would be somewhere in between. It gives you a little bit more information to give yourself a wee bit more of a conscious understanding of how you do it and how well you do it as you're going forward. And then we talk about some of the factors, the internal and external factors that affect and influence your listening. The internal ones being your physical and mental energy at a given point in time, your level of presence at a given point in time, your attention span, your biases, your assumptions, your level of interest in the topic, any cultural nuances, how much respect you have for the person that is imparting, that is saying, that are giving you the information at the same time. And the external factors are who it is you're with. That could almost be the latter part of what I just mentioned on internal, the time of the day, the location, the physical environment, for example, the weather, how the traffic was, the office space that you're in, any distractions that are present, technological, digital distractions, things like that, and the loudness and quietness of the area. So there's two parts of that. That's very, very important to understand. Stuff that you control and stuff that you don't control, and how you react to both the things that you control and the things that you don't control will provide you an understanding of your optimum conditions for listening under that particular circumstance. So there's a lot going on, and being aware of these factors is certainly going to raise your consciousness to a level where you will have more cognitive control over your actions, therefore more of an ability to perform to the level that you're looking to perform to. So then what do you do when your optimum conditions for listening are compromised? And this is where your presence, your awareness, your sense of self, your sense of the situation, and mutual respect comes in. So I offer up being honest. If something has been compromised, just be honest and say, time out, I tuned out for a minute there, I don't know what happened, the last thing I remember was this, can we go back and can you just repeat that last part for me, please? It's much better than pretending that you heard it and then moving on and possibly re-asking a question that was already answered, or repeating information that's completely completely irrelevant or such. I guess that wouldn't be repeating information that's irrelevant, but giving information that's irrelevant. The second part I go into is understand how and when you need to give yourself what I said in the blog was a senses shake. Do you need to, are you getting tired by sitting down? Do you need to stand up? If you're standing up, do you need to sit down? Do whatever you need to do to just give yourself that little bit of something different, to give your senses an opportunity to kind of rejuvenate themselves and say, right, okay, this is good, I'm back in the zone. I'm sure most, if not all of us, have had an opportunity or a circumstance or situation where you're kind of drifting away, you're starting to get tired, and you need to do something just to kind of give yourself a shake. And I do offer up that if something is online or it's being recorded and there's just not the opportunity to be able to stop it, at least you have the opportunity to go back if it's being recorded and listen to the parts that you missed, and then get an opportunity to be able to act on them as to whatever you have to do after that. If you're not being listened to, I think honestly it goes back to the being honest part when you're not listening, is just to acknowledge it in the moment. Because if the person is zoned out, instead of taking it personally, instead of getting upset about it, instead of being put off your game and your message and the delivery of the message gets in some way distorted as a result of that, you have the opportunity to just be kind, be empathetic. And it happens to me, it can happen to anyone. It doesn't mean they hate you, it doesn't mean they hate the topic or the delivery model or anything. You literally have no idea what's going on with anyone else. So I offer up a wee bit of of a way that you could do that by saying, let's just take a wee pause here. I noticed that I lost you for a wee bit there. This is a really important topic, and I do want to make sure that you absorb it as I intend for you to absorb it, so that we're all set up for success going forward. Should we take a break? Should we stand up? Should we move around? Will we go grab a coffee? Should we reconvene at another time so that we can get this information? That shows, as I say, empathy. It shows an importance of the topic and how important you value their ability to absorb this at the same time, so that it's a compliment in and of itself at the same time. So, there's different ways that you're able to impart that message. The main thing is just don't be insulting, and don't lead by humiliation when it gets to a point like that. As I say, you wouldn't like it to be done to you, and you don't know what's going on with those folks as well. So the 7 steps to improving your listening skills in the blog is to practice, is to find your optimum conditions, to find out how you act and react under different conditions and such, to observe how other people do it, to look at the non-verbal clues and cues that you get when you're listening and when you're being listened to seek feedback. Provide feedback as well, of course, but to seek feedback on, do you think I'm a good listener? Are there certain conditions where you don't believe that I am? Why is that? What would you suggest I do to rectify that? Take some training if you need to. Do more research. Reflect and learn. You're not going to be perfect every single time, but the opportunity to sit back afterwards and say, I wasn't at my best there. I think I know why. This is what I'm going to do about it going forward. And then the last one is have a bit of patience. Have patience with other people and have a bit of patience with yourself. No one is perfect. And in summary, like, being listened to genuinely is something that makes us all feel valuable. And who really doesn't want to feel valuable? I want to feel valuable. I'm sure you do too. So please consider what you do need to do to listen better and be more present in the moment and mindful of what other people might need, so that they can listen to you in the manner that you want and need them to listen to you. Very, very little, honestly folks, very little will go wrong if you engage in present and active listening, as a life practice, not just in professional settings, as you move forward and navigate things in the future. And who knows, you might actually just learn something along the way. And the next time you encounter a situation where someone should be listening and they're actually not listening, as Harry Styles says, treat people with kindness, be courteous, be professional, approach the situation with a bit of empathy. You would absolutely appreciate the same sentiment reciprocated, I'm absolutely sure. And I'll just finish off the listening part here. I did put a Coach Gaz challenge at the bottom of the blog. Just think about how you do it today. Think about how other people do it. Model the skills of people who are much better at it than you are, and be mindful about the gains that you make going forward and the impacts of those gains. But the very last thing I'll leave you with, I heard something, I think it was on the Brendan Burchard training that I did, where he talked about a previous mentor. I believe that's where he got it from. But he says, and there are 2 types of people. There's the hippo and there's the elephant. The hippo has very small ears and a big mouth, and the elephant has very big ears and a small mouth. Be a hippo. I'll leave that with you. You can make your own interpretation of that, and I'd love to hear from you as to what you think. But I love that analogy, and it's kind of comedy a little bit as well. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, instead of a book report, I'm going to do a very, very quick course overview of the High Performance Habits course that I completed there just in the last couple of weeks by Brendan Burchard, based on the book High Performance Habits that I had mentioned a little bit earlier there. And it's initially, the book in terms of its premise is based on a worldwide study of people who were identified or classified as high performers, and it was to establish exactly what they did and how they did it and why they did it and why their results and overall enjoyment of life differed from people who would be considered underperformers. That's the overall kind of premise. And what he says is high performance involves 3 major things: presence or full engagement. Presence and full engagement can be synonymous with each other, and that's presence in the moment, joy in what you're doing, and confidence in your why and your what and your how, that sort of thing. So presence, joy and confidence is present in all high performers. And there's a quote here by Aristotle which goes along the lines of excellence is an art won by training and habituation. We do not act rightly because we have virtue or excellence, but we rather have those because we have acted rightly. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. So forming the right type and style of habits is the key part. And what he says is high performers are more successful than their peers, yet they appear less stressed. They're more confident that they will achieve their goals despite any adversity that's put in their path. They are uniquely productive. They seem to have mastered the prolific quality output, which is one key area of the course and of the book. So remember that for the future, prolific quality output. They work passionately regardless of any sort of traditional rewards. They are admired and adaptive leaders. They're happier than most people. They're healthier than most people. They get better grades and they feel appreciated and that their work is making a difference. Do any of those resonate with you? Would you classify yourself as a high performer? If not, why not? A little bit of food for thought there. And what he also goes on to say is high performance is not strongly correlated or linked with age, with gender, nationality, intelligence, personality, strength, creativity, empathy, years of experience, or any form of compensation. So it's open season. It's open season for anyone to give themselves the opportunity to be a high performer. There is nothing, literally nothing, that's holding you back from that. And then he goes on to talk about there's 6 habits that he has in the course and in the book, and they're split between 3 personal habits and 3 social habits. The 3 personal habits are clarity, energy, and necessity. How much clarity you have, I mentioned that at the top of the pod. How do you generate your own energy to be able to make sure you can do what you're wanting to do? And the necessity part is, why are you doing this? Who are you doing this for? Creating a sense of necessity and and social obligation to be able to do what you have set out to do. On the social side, productivity, how you can increase your productivity without burning yourself out. Influence, your circle of influence, your influence of control and how people influence you. And then the last habit is courage, and taking the courage to step out yourself, taking the courage to announce that you're going to do and commit to a certain course of action or course or qualification or career or hobby, whatever that looks like. So that's the 6 habits there. Each of the habits has a list of practices that are listed and explained to help you build a habit in each of those areas using your interpretation of it, with a lot of practice, a lot of introspection and interpretation as to why these will work for you. And at the end of each section there is a set of videos and books that are recommended to supplement the learnings from that. So I'm going to leave it at that for right now. I will do a more comprehensive book report when I'm actually through the book. I'm doing a thing for the first time. Actually, right now I'm listening to an audio book. I typically don't do that because I like to take my notes and scribble things on books and such like that. Well, I'm not so much of a scribbler. I've tried to do that recently, but it still makes me feel a wee bit uncomfortable if I'm being dead honest. But I like the physical copy of the book, but I'm getting through the material, so I'm really trying to absorb this in different fashions. I've done the course, I'm listening to the audio book, I will read the physical book, and then at some point in the future I will do a comprehensive book report. But this stuff, honestly folks, for me, is the real deal. I absolutely love this stuff. I believe what he has. I love the way it's set out. I love the types and styles of habits, both from a personal and social perspective, and the various influences and learnings within each of these is dynamite. It's absolute gold dust for me, so I'd love to impart that wisdom to you at some point in the future as well. Okay, my friends, that is it for this episode. I hope that this episode of the Best You, a Coaching Podcast, was a valuable use of your time and that you will join me for more as we move forward together. If you did find it valuable, I would really appreciate if you would forward it to someone who you think might get some value or might enjoy it as we continue to try and work and increase the community that we're building here. Don't forget to take a quick peek at garygillen.com for more content, information, back episodes, back blogs, and such. I guess I should say a library of blogs. That's probably the best way to announce that. And until next time, please do take care of yourself, and all the very best to you on your ongoing journey. I will talk to you very soon, my friends. Okay, take care. Bye bye now.